They had all looked at her the same way, with that quick flicker of judgment that came before politeness, the kind that stung worse than open cruelty. 60 years old, widowed for nearly a decade, her hair silvered not by vanity but by years of dust, sun, and survival. In the small frontier town of Dry Creek, everyone knew Martha Hale. They knew her late husband had died under a fallen beam in the sawmill. They knew she owned a thin strip of land on the edge of nowhere and a house that leaned just slightly to the west, as if tired of standing. And they knew, without ever saying it aloud, that she was considered finished. Men passed her by when dances were announced. Suitors who once spoke kindly now spoke only of weather. When the preacher's wife tried to match her with a widower from Red Bluff, he laughed and said he wanted warmth in his bed, not memories. Martha heard about it from the store clerk, and that night she sat alone at her kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the ring she still wore because removing it felt like erasing proof that she had once been chosen. Loneliness at 60 was not loud or dramatic, it was quiet, settled, heavy, like dust that never fully cleared. She woke before dawn every day, fed her chickens, patched her fence, and spoke only when necessary, because speaking too much reminded her of how little anyone listened. The broken rancher came into town the same way storms did, unannounced and unwelcome. His name was Eli Carter, though few bothered to learn it at first. He walked with a slight hitch, favoring a leg that had been crushed under a spoked horse to Winter's back. His ranch had burned after lightning struck the barn, killing half his herd and most of his hope. Word traveled fast in towns like Dry Creek, and by the time Eli arrived, he was already labeled unlucky, half-ruined, dangerous to invest in. He didn't argue with any of it. He took the cheapest room above the saloon, ate alone, and spoke only when spoken to. His eyes carried the look of a man who had survived things he never talked about. When he met Martha for the first time, it wasn't romantic or dramatic. He was standing at the general store, struggling to lift a sack of grain with one good leg, sweat beading at his brow, jaw clenched in stubborn refusal to ask for help. Martha stepped forward without thinking. She placed her hands under the sack and lifted with him. Their fingers brushed, rough skin against rough skin. Eli turned, startled, ready to protest, but stopped when he saw her face, not young, not delicate, but steady, capable, familiar in a way he couldn't explain. "I've got it," she said simply. No pity, no curiosity, just fact. From that moment, something shifted, though neither of them named it. Eli began stopping by her place to help mend fences in exchange for meals. Martha cooked without fuss beans, cornbread, stew, and Eli ate like a man relearning how. They didn't talk much at first. Silence had become comfortable for both of them, a shared language of people who had been disappointed by life and were tired of explaining it. Townsfolk noticed, of course, they always did. Whispers followed Martha when she walked to church. Why was she wasting time on a broken man? Why would he spend time with an old widow? They said old love was foolish, that desire had an expiration date. Martha heard it all and said nothing. But at night she lay awake, wondering if they were right. Eli, for his part, struggled with guilt. He had buried his wife 5 years earlier, a fever taking her before spring thawed. He told himself he was only being neighborly, that he owed her for the meals, that he didn't notice the way her laugh surprised him, or how her presence eased the constant ache in his chest. One evening, a storm rolled in fast and violent. Eli was caught halfway between town and Martha's place when his leg finally gave out. He fell hard in the mud, pain flaring white-hot. By the time Martha heard the pounding on her door, rain was slicing sideways, and Eli was barely upright. She pulled him inside without a word, stripped off his soaked coat, and sat him down by the fire. Her hands were firm as she cleaned the scrape on his leg, fingers warm, unafraid. Eli stared at the flames, jaw tight, ashamed of his weakness. "Everyone thinks I'm done," he muttered. Martha paused, then looked at him, really looked. "They said the same about me," she replied quietly. In that moment, something fragile and honest passed between them, not desire, not yet, but recognition. To people the world had dismissed, seeing each other clearly for the first time. Days turned into weeks. Eli began sleeping better. Martha found herself humming again while she worked. The town didn't soften, but it grew quieter, as if unsure how to argue with something so calm and real. One afternoon, while fixing the porch rail, Eli slipped. Martha reached out instinctively, steadying him, and he laughed a real laugh, unguarded. The sound startled them both. He looked at her then, not as an old widow, not as a caretaker, but as a woman who had survived and still stood strong. Martha felt heat rise in her chest, fear and hope tangled together. She had been invisible for so long that being seen felt dangerous. That night, Eli stayed late. They talked until the lantern burned low about loss, about regret, about the strange courage it took to keep living when life kept taking. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated, then placed his hand over hers. It wasn't youthful or desperate. It was gentle, respectful, and in that simple touch, Martha felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not youth, not fantasy, but worth. What followed was not gossip-worthy passion, but something deeper and rarer. Eli never made her feel old. Martha never made him feel broken. Together, they felt useful again, chosen again. And when the town finally understood that what they shared was real, not scandalous, it was already too late to stop it. Because love, real love, does not ask permission from age or circumstance. It simply arrives, quiet and undeniable, and refuses to leave. And if this story moved you, if you believe the Wild West was full of untold stories of second chances, quiet courage, and love that arrived late, but strong, subscribe to Wild West Dairies. Because out here, the most powerful stories aren't about guns or gold. They're about hearts that refuse to give up,